Roadhouse, 1989. A bar-fighting philosopher named Dalton, a corrupt tyrant running a small Missouri town, and a cast that turned a critically trashed action flick into one of the most rewatched cult classics in American film history. Critics hated it back then. Audiences never let it go. Here's what really happened to the legends who made it. Cast 1. Patrick Swayze played James Dalton. He was the coolest bouncer in movie history. A philosophy graduate with a black belt. A man who could quote Zen wisdom in one breath and rip a man's throat out with his bare hand in the next. Dalton wasn't just a character. He became a cultural touchstone, the blueprint for every calm, dangerous, tough guy who came after him. And Patrick Swayze earned that role the hard way. He trained in ballet as a kid, got mocked for it, and turned that discipline into raw physical power that made his fight scenes look like nothing else in action cinema. Off-screen, Swayze was already becoming one of the defining leading men of his generation. Just months after Roadhouse, he'd star in Ghost, one of the biggest films of 1990, and years earlier, he'd already broken hearts everywhere with Dirty Dancing. He seemed unstoppable. Then, in January 2008, everything changed. Swayze was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest diagnoses in medicine. Most people don't survive more than months. Swayze fought for 20. He refused to slow down, continuing to film the TV series The Beast, even as his body was failing him, determined to work until the very end. He underwent chemotherapy, experimental drug trials, everything modern medicine could offer. It wasn't enough. On September 14th, 2009, Patrick Swayze passed away at his California ranch, surrounded by his wife Lisa and his family. He was only 57 years old. Hollywood lost one of its toughest, gentlest leading men that day. A man who spent his final months proving, one more time, exactly the kind of fight he had in him. Cast 2. Sam Elliott played Wade Garrett, the legendary mustache, the voice that could calm a bar fight or start one with a single word. In Roadhouse, Elliott played Wade Garrett, Dalton's mentor and best friend, the older cooler who taught him everything and who meets a brutal end at the hands of the film's villain. It's one of the most gut-punch moments in the whole movie. But in real life, Sam Elliott's story didn't end anywhere close to there. He was already a Hollywood veteran by 1989, and he simply kept going, decade after decade, becoming one of the most recognizable voices and faces in American film. Then, well into his 70s, Elliott found an entirely new generation of fans. He starred as a grizzled trail guide in 1883, the prequel to the Yellowstone universe, delivering a performance so raw and physical it won him a Screen Actors Guild Award, an honor he called the most meaningful of his 55-year career. But that role came at a cost. Elliott has openly admitted the shoot beat the hell out of him. He suffered a fall, tore 2 tendons in his hip that will never fully heal, and says the constant gunfire on set left him with permanent hearing damage. Most actors his age would call it a career. Not Elliott. He went straight from that pain into Landman, reuniting with Billy Bob Thornton and playing yet another demanding physical role. Now well into his 80s, Sam Elliott is still saddling up, still working, and still one of the coolest cowboys the movies have ever produced. Cast 3. Kelly Lynch played Dr. Elizabeth Clay. She was Dalton's love interest, the small-town doctor with the steady hands who kept stitching him up after every brawl, even as she questioned why he kept walking back into danger. It was a role that required real chemistry with Swayze, and critics at the time noted it was one of the more grounded, human elements of an otherwise over-the-top movie. But 1989 turned out to be a massive year for Kelly Lynch, far beyond Roadhouse. That same year, she starred in Drugstore Cowboy, Gus Van Sant's gritty crime drama, delivering a performance that earned her an Independent Spirit Award nomination for Best Female Lead. A huge critical achievement for an actress who'd just broken out in a Patrick Swayze action movie months earlier. From there, Lynch built one of the more quietly impressive careers to come out of this cast. She appeared in Curly Sue, Virtuosity, and the 2000 reboot of Charlie's Angels, working steadily across 3 decades. She landed a recurring role on the acclaimed series The L Word and continued picking up film and television work well into her 50s and 60s. Now in her 60s, Lynch shows no signs of slowing down. She appeared in the 2025 film Dead Man's Wire, proving she's still an active, working actress nearly 4 decades after she first stitched up Dalton's wounds. Married to writer-producer Mitch Glazer since 1992, Lynch has managed to build both a lasting career and a private life, largely out of the tabloid spotlight, a rare combination in Hollywood. Cast 4. Ben Gazzara played Brad Wesley, the man everyone loved to hate. Brad Wesley was the corrupt businessman who owned the town, paid off the sheriff, and terrorized anyone who stood in his way, until Dalton showed up. It's one of the great villain performances of 80s action cinema, delivered with a kind of calm, menacing charisma that only a true stage veteran could pull off. And Ben Gazzara was exactly that. Long before Roadhouse, Gazzara had already lived an entire legendary career. He originated the role of Brick in the original Broadway production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof back in 1955, a role so iconic it was later handed to Paul Newman for the film version. He earned 3 Tony nominations and became a favorite collaborator of legendary director John Cassavetes, starring in films like Husbands and The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Gazzara kept working right up until his final years, taking on the unforgettable role of porn producer Jackie Treehorn in the Coen brothers' cult classic, The Big Lebowski, in 1998, introducing him to an entirely new generation of fans who had no idea he'd once terrorized Patrick Swayze on screen. He continued acting in film and television throughout the 2000s. In February 2012, Ben Gazzara passed away in Manhattan after a battle with pancreatic cancer. He was 81 years old. Right up to the end, this was a man who never stopped chasing the work, a true method actor, and one of the last true links to the golden age of American stage and screen. Cast 5. Kevin Tighe played Frank Tillman, the man who hired Dalton in the first place. As bar owner Frank Tillman, Tighe played the guy trying to run a legitimate business in a town controlled by a criminal, the character whose desperation kicks the entire plot into motion. It's a role built on quiet authority, and Tighe had already built a career on exactly that. Years before Roadhouse, Tighe had become a television icon, playing paramedic Roy DeSoto on the 70s hit series Emergency, a show that inspired real-life firefighters and first responders for a generation. After Emergency ended, Tighe reinvented himself as one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors, often playing quietly threatening authority figures in films like Matawan and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Then, in the 2000s, he found a whole new audience playing the deeply unsettling father of John Locke on the hit ABC series Lost, a performance that terrified viewers who had grown up watching him as a gentle TV paramedic decades earlier. Tighe kept working steadily for years after that, but eventually stepped back from acting almost entirely due to health issues, disappearing from screens for nearly a decade. Then, in a genuine comeback, Tighe returned in 2025 with a role in Paul Thomas Anderson's acclaimed film, One Battle After Another. Now 81 years old, Kevin Tighe remains connected to the real paramedic community that embraced him decades ago, and recently served as an executive producer on a documentary about real-life first responders, proving that even after 50 years, he's still drawn to telling stories about the people who show up when things go wrong. Cast 6. Marshall Teague played Jimmy, the rival tough guy. Jimmy was Brad Wesley's enforcer, and his showdown with Dalton produced one of the most brutal, bare-knuckle fight sequences of the entire 80s, a scene fans still talk about decades later. That intensity wasn't an accident. Before he ever stepped in front of a camera, Marshall Teague served in the United States Navy, where he won a NATO heavyweight kickboxing championship, and later worked as a real deputy sheriff undercover in Memphis, Tennessee. When he and Swayze filmed their fight scenes, Teague has said, they genuinely weren't holding back. They were hitting each other for real. After Roadhouse made him a cult figure, Teague went on to build a long, steady career in Hollywood, landing memorable roles in two massive Michael Bay blockbusters, The Rock in 1996 and Armageddon in 1998. He also found a devoted following, playing the Narn warrior Talon on the beloved sci-fi series Babylon 5. He kept working across the 2000s in film and television, amassing over 130 credits. When Amazon rebooted Roadhouse in 2024 with Jake Gyllenhaal, Teague spoke candidly to the press about it, sharing fond, blunt memories of working with Swayze and admitting the new film's fight. Choreography sounded a little different from what he and Swayze had pulled off decades earlier. Now in his 70s, Teague still makes convention appearances for fans, sharing stories from a career that started with a 230-pound man playing Puck in a Shakespeare play in green tights, a story he still loves to tell.